And I ask all of you if you will mute yourselves so you don't show up in the recording. That's the other thing I always have to remember. So there are a few characteristics of truth. One, truth draws us to seek and connect with the divine, however we conceive the divine. It draws us to that. Truth is guided by the principle, do no harm to yourself or others. And even when others may attack you, truth guides us to seek measures that would minimize any harm if we are doing some degree of self-protection. Truth fosters an understanding of others as your neighbor and not your enemy. Truth does not catastrophize situations, but looks very clear-headed to discern the options that are there with the goal of uplifting everyone involved. Truth honors the full measure of dignity, personal sovereignty, and equality of all people. And here's the other, truth is consistent across time and contexts. And truth does not seduce us to use information against anybody. So those are some characteristics of truth. And I don't think those are hard concepts to grasp. But so what is it that would have us fall prey to lies so easily, such that in this election season that we're in, both at the presidential contest and the contests down ballot, we often know that it's a 50-50 split or a 46-46. And some of us say, how can people, that many millions of people, be seduced by something that some of us might very clearly see are falsehoods? Well, and I think fear has a whole lot to do with it. Fear and whatever our underlying narrative and values are. So you might know the acronym of fear, false enemies appearing real. And so sometimes fear would have us see in our neighbor that they're the enemy, which never was the case. And we know that happened in Springfield, Ohio, where a woman whose cat she was unable to find, and she, because of fear of her neighbor and how she cast neighbor as enemy, presumed that her neighbor had taken her cat and had done whatever with it. And then that got catastrophized, as you may know, and used as this lie again and again and again by a particular campaign. Truth, I mean, fear always impedes our ability to discern what is true. But not only that, fear clouds and eclipses the values that we may have. So we might say we value family. And yet in this season, these past 8 years, 9 years, we know families have been torn asunder because some members of the family have been taken over by particular lies that have been spoken again and again and again. And for some, the more they speak the lie, some people have believed it is true. But we know repeating a lie does not convert it to truth. And many of us have been socialized in our culture not to own the feelings of fear that we may have. And so what we do instead is take on this shield of bravado and self-righteousness and unwavering in our belief because we don't want to acknowledge that we are afraid. And so when we see people who have all of this bravado and who are not at all open to any other perspectives, it is a signal that they are deeply afraid. When fear grabs hold, we become less and less able to hear the perspectives or even honor the experiences of other. And we become less able to discern what is true and what is factual. Fear grabs us in ways that, because we don't want to own that we're afraid, it starts taking over everything. And it eclipses the very things that we know God, however we understand God, might be calling us to. But we'll use the frame of God, even though what we do and what we speak is not at all godly. Fear, when it grabs hold, those values of compassion and those values of love your neighbor as yourself, all of those become eclipsed by an unconscious survivalist value: me, myself, and I. And so today I want us to pray for our compassion for sisters and brothers whose lives have been taken over by fear, so much so that they are unable to see, to discern truth. And as Octavia Butler wrote in her book, The Second Earth Seed, for us to choose leaders with wisdom and forethought, for to be led by a coward is to be controlled by all the coward's fears. And indeed, this is such a time that we see that again and again. And she continues in her poem, opening to the 11th chapter of her book, Earthseed. To be led by a thief is to offer up your most precious treasures to be stolen. And we have seen how the treasures of family have been stolen in so many people's lives. And so I'm going to lead us in prayer, and then I invite you to share your prayers as well. Spirit of love and truth and compassion, spirit of wisdom and dignity, spirit that sees through the crevices of our hearts and knows our fears, even when we don't want to speak them, don't want to own them ourselves. Oh God, we need you in these times when so many of our sisters and brothers, our neighbors, have been overtaken by their fears and overtaken by the fears of those whom they call leader. We need you to give us wisdom and truth-telling and compassion as we interact with those in our families, those in our neighborhoods, those in our workplaces, our schools, even within our own faith communities. Give us the heart of compassion and wisdom as we interact with them, as we listen to them and hold their fears always in the crucible of your love. Not just our love, because our love, when it bumps up against other people's fears, can so easily be seduced into fear responses. But you have promised us that your perfect love would cast out all fears. And so we ask first that you would help us recognize the fears we may have in our own hearts and minds that leave us susceptible to some of those unconscious narratives that we might have toward others who are not like us. Help us to see our own fears and for us to give them to you into your perfect love. And as we continue to do that, help us to see our neighbor, to see our brothers, our sisters, to see those who we want to call crazy or want to call stupid. Help us to move those words out of our mouths and out of our hearts and out of our minds, and to understand them as afraid. And oh, the foolish things any of us can do when we are overtaken by fear. And so help us to lean into you, lean into your love, lean into your wisdom in these days. We are less than 4 weeks out from Election Day. We are leaning into your love, into your wisdom. We know that no matter the outcome, those who are overtaken by fear will have some form of protest. And help us to lean into your love, even as many of us are traumatized, even now, dealing with PTSD from all that we experienced January 6th, 2001. Help us to rest in you and to give all of it to you. For indeed, your perfect love casts out our fears. And help us to be those brokers, those purveyors of love and peace and compassion and wisdom in such ways that it might be infectious in the spaces that you would send us. We ask this in your many names. Amen.